We have heard many recently say that the SEC schedule is the most difficult. Nobody would like to trade schedule with us. Nobody would like to play 8 conference games in the Citadel every single season. Well, of course, some of Big 12 country would disagree. Thankfully, the Cowboys have Oregon coming up with Bama on the line, while other conferences are running away from competition. We're going to welcome it, but we need more of it.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to your shop at Locked On Oklahoma State. We're here to give you the best coverage as much as physically possible. We're going to do this a little bit of a live edition today. My name is Cody Stovall. You can find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Primarily because as the season progresses, we're going to try to do a multitude of live things. Oftentimes it's going to be with guests, but I wanted to kind of kick it off a little bit here and do some live before the season gets underway. We're naturally going to talk about scheduling here before we kind of get to the meat and taters with some guests and get a live feel going. Naturally, for the regulators, a.k.a. regulars out here, you know how this goes. We'll do a traditional 25-ish minute show, and then we'll kind of turn it over to the comments section for those out there on the podcast side of things. We're discussing the schedules. Thankfully, Oklahoma State has Oregon coming up, and the SEC country has been continuously talking about, whether it be Greg Sankey or some of the individual coaches, how difficult the SEC schedule is and how nobody in the country would like to trade schedules with the SEC. And I just patently find that false. I think that whenever you look at the schedules compared to some of the Big 12 schools, like Oklahoma State, we get to go to Oregon this year, of course. BYU has a tough couple games coming up. Baylor gets to take on Auburn. But I think we need to do more of that, not just in Stillwater, but within the entire conference. While these other conferences are trying to dictate about how great their interconference rivalries are, we need to find degrees of separation in this conference. Whenever you look at Oklahoma State compared to some of these others, right? Well, let's talk about OU, our brethren right down the road. From their SEC schedule, it is pretty difficult. They do get to take on Michigan, so I'm not sitting here saying their schedule is terrible, but they do also play Illinois State and Temple and Kent State. And Kent State this previous season was viewed as like the worst team in college football. But it's not just OU. We're not picking on OU. Alabama plays Eastern Illinois this upcoming season. So, of course, yes, you could make an argument about how their conference games are going to be difficult, but their non-conference is always built in with a bunch of fluffy stuff. So they take on Alabama, gets to take on Eastern Illinois. Georgia, the mighty Bulldogs are taking on Austin Peay. Mississippi, Georgia also takes on Charlotte. Now, I'm not going to throw a bunch of shade at Charlotte here. How ironic would it be to see Brian Nardo and that defense at Charlotte kind of make some miraculous things happen? Is it likely? No. But nonetheless, it does accentuate the point that the SEC is going to continuously do this. Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin was boo-hooing and whining and crying about not being in the playoff this previous season. So this upcoming season, they get to play Georgia State. I mean, that's pretty tough. And they also get to play Washington State. It's ridiculous. The Florida Gators, another SEC team, they play Long Island University. So every team is going to have a couple of games that are designed very early on to kind of help your depth chart get understanding and understand the playbook a little bit more, and for your coaches to have a good understanding of where the players should be on the field and what packages are going to work the best. Everybody should open the season with essentially a fluffy style of football game. I 100% agree with that. But we need to get rid of, in the Big 12, having more than one. This is the most difficult conference top to bottom. Is the top teams in the SEC going to be more difficult per capita? Most likely, but the bottom half of the SEC, the bottom half of the Big 10 is not in comparison to the bottom half of the Big 12. So no matter how you slice it, you're going to want more scheduling. And as everybody is looking for advantages, I think that the scheduling, RPI, strength of schedule, maybe it's not going to be a component later on in the CFP model, but it is a component right now, and we need to take advantage of that. Oklahoma State specifically, of course, has Oregon coming up this season. Next year, we have Oregon again. 2027, we get to take on Arkansas. 2028, we get to take on Alabama. 2029, we take on Bama again. And then all the way down to 2032, we get Arkansas again. Then we play Nebraska 2034, 2035. Are the schedules going to be the same that far out? Likely not, right? So this Nebraska thing in 2034, 2035, it might not even come to fruition. But what about the games in between? Whenever you have Tulsa and Southeastern Louisiana sandwiched before Bama, Can we get rid of one of those? I'm not saying that we need to get rid of the Tulsa game. I like the Tulsa game. Does it have to be a yearly game? I don't necessarily see why. Are we excited to take on UT Martin in this particular season to see the different iterations of the offense and Haas Haney, Zane Flores together? Possibly, yes. But moving on in the future, get rid of Murray State, get rid of Western Illinois, get rid of Southeastern Louisiana, or maybe swap a Tulsa here and there. Give us more competition. While the SEC is going to continuously vaunt themselves as the top of the top and the most difficult conference you could physically possibly exist in, I think that Oklahoma State and the entire Big 12 need to grasp advantages every time they pop up. Scheduling aggressively is something the SEC is not going to do. Of course, they're going to have big games pop up occasionally. I think you could even throw Notre Dame into this equation. Not necessarily because of their scheduling, but Stanford used to be really good. USC used to be really good. So those conference matchups or outside of conference matchups used to be viewed a little bit differently. Oklahoma State is in a position where we get to play one of the top teams in the country. And I do think that Arkansas, if Sam Pittman gets it figured out, will have the opportunity to climb up the SEC over the next couple of seasons. But let's get rid of these ridiculous games. Let the SEC have their fluffy game. Let the SEC go play Long Island University. Let the SEC, I mean, Arkansas does play Memphis this year, so at least they did a little bit better in the scheduling department. But there's somebody in the SEC, I think in week 9, plays the Citadel this year. And that seems to be pretty commonplace. So while the Big 12 is looking for something to kind of differentiate themselves from the SEC, I think scheduling could be a big factor here. So Oklahoma State needs to be more aggressive. Give us more Oregons, more Bamas. I mean, heck, maybe expedite the Nebraska situation. Speed that thing up. Instead of 2034, 2035, perhaps maybe you could implement them in the game instead of Western Illinois. Again, having a fluffy game in the beginning of the season, it does make sense. But what the SEC does is they purposely have one of their extra fluffy games. So they'll play somebody fluffy in week 1 or week 2, like everybody else. But then they'll also factor in the Citadel or the School for the Deaf, Blind, and Mute team at the end of the year. So the Big 12 does not need to adopt that philosophy, which I have seen floated a little bit. Well, maybe the Big 12 needs to go to 8 conference games, or maybe the Big 12 needs to incorporate a late season. It's a bye week. That's what it is. It's another week later on in the season where you can utilize the backups. So the starters have an opportunity to get healthy. You're not going to get that in the Big 12. The parity in the conference is what makes it pretty lucrative at the moment. Now, naturally, at some point in time, it would be nice if we had a flag bearer kind of take hold of this conference. But until that time happens, we need to take advantage of any opportunities that we can to strike while the iron's hot. Speaking of the SEC, in this last year's college football playoff, the Big 12 got 1 team in. The SEC got 3 teams in. Yet the only SEC team that won was a former Big 12 team, and that was barely over a new Big 12 team in Arizona. The Texas-Arizona State game was one for the ages, but that was the only SEC game that they won. The Big Ten has won the last 2 national championships. So maybe we should be talking about the Big Ten being this heralded conference, but that's not what Greg Sankey and some of these other coaches are going to keep presenting, right? They're going to keep pushing that the SEC is the bee's knees for all of your college football needs. I think that the Big 12 does not need to adopt that model. We need to go the exact opposite, be more aggressive. And of course, you've had like the Nebraskas and the OUs of the world say that we don't really want our schedules to be more difficult in the out of conference. That's precisely why the Big 12 needs to jump on this opportunity. If teams in the SEC and the Big 10, like Nebraska and OU, are already talking about, well, we don't really want to do that later on. We don't want to play those level of teams later on. Then this is the Big 12's opportunity. The game against Oregon this year is a game that all of Big 12 countries are going to be paying attention to. All of the countries are going to be paying attention to. And that could catapult Oklahoma State throughout the remainder of the year. But some of these other games, Baylor over Auburn, we really need Baylor to get that thing done. We need more of these games. We're looking for opportunities over the SEC. They're going to talk a lot, but they're also going to schedule the Citadel or the Deaf, Blind, and Mute School in week 9. The Big 12, from top to bottom, is the only league where you can experience a loss, no matter what your ranking is coming into that ball game. We need to continue to accentuate that, and I think that being more aggressive in scheduling and getting rid of the extra fluff game is going to be beneficial. Load the schedule. If you know the Big 12 is going to play 9 conference games and the SEC is not going to do that, and you know the SEC is going to play that fluffy game, then we need to be more aggressive, get rid of the fluffy stuff, and just be all about the business. Speaking of being all about the business, it's going to be easy for you to be all about the business if you have the energy to do so. 5 Hour Energy is going to be that for you. It is time to fuel up and turn up with 5 Hour Energy. The transfusion package is going to combine the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golfing drink. Minus the alcohol, of course, but when you get out on the links, you need that energizing shot to bet with your buddies or hammer in a par or maybe even chip in for a birdie. Whether you're doing that or you're just simply out there to make memories with your friends or hit a hole in one, let the energy of 5 Hour carry the course for you. And let's be honest, some days out on the course or even off of it, you're going to need that extra boost to stay sharp and stay energized. Sometimes you just might need that to get to the game a little bit quicker if you're going to make a long drive or deal with the airport. I think we've all been in a group and tried to make ridiculous bets, right? A crazy wager on a hole or a crazy wager on a shot. Regardless of how it goes down, why not bet 5 Hour Energy? Or why not utilize 5 Hour Energy to win that bet? Think of the most ridiculous shot you've ever seen, taken, or made on a golf course. Now imagine that same shot with 5 Hour Energy. Golf is all about the good times, good people, and good flavors. Of course, on the course, the grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cheer cart. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. That is the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use the promo code LOCKEDONGOLF, all one word, to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid through September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. So whether you're meeting up with friends or you're trying to turn 18 holes into 36 holes, get the energizing boost that you need to power through the day. Order your transfusion-flavored 5 Hour Energy shots to get right on the links, to get right with your friends, and capitalize in the betting department. All right, now we get to jump into this conversation of Miami. Yes, the ACC is already experiencing more turmoil with some teams publicly voicing their desire to get out of the conference. It's already essentially being a done deal, which means that the nail in the coffin of the ACC might already be in existence. Once again, I love having this conversation, but what I also love about it is coming into this, a lot of people determined that the Florida States and the Clemsons and the Miamis of the world were going to be destined to be elsewhere. Now, of course, you've got Utah in the Big 12 that fancies themselves as the next iteration of the Big 10, which is kind of crazy because 15 years ago they were G5, then they go to the Pac-12, and now they've been hooting and hollering about how they are Big 10 made and they are Big 10 ready. Whatever, I guess by that philosophy, Texas State is going to be ready for the SEC in the next decade. But nonetheless, Miami is a team that keeps getting overlooked. Like people talking about how valuable North Carolina could be in the SEC or how Clemson would fit very, very well in the Big 10. But nobody seems to be talking about Miami unless they're talking about Miami carrying on the ACC. And I think that would be absolutely foolish of them to even attempt to do that because the SEC would essentially be a dying conference. I mean, they are a dying conference. If you lose some of the heavy hitter conversation, yes, we lost Texas and OU. Thankfully, we were able to rebound fairly quickly, adding Colorado, BYU, and then we later added the remainder of the four corner schools. I think that was a good thing for the Big 12 in the end because OU and Texas were causing a bunch of problems. To some degree, you could make that same argument for Florida State. Maybe Florida State is the Texas of the ACC. Maybe Florida State's the one that's causing all of the ruckus. Right? They're obviously the ones that tried to take this thing to a litigation phase, which has gotten us to where we are now. But I find it crazy that Miami is a massive brand that is, I think you can consider them, at least in the blue blood conversation. Are they a tried and true stamped on a rival blue blood? Maybe not. But Miami would be a blue blood of the Big 12. And I'm not sitting here and saying that Miami's not good enough to get to these other places, but for whatever reason, they're the ones being talked about the least. You keep hearing about Florida State and Clemson and North Carolina. But Miami keeps getting left by the wayside. So why would Miami stay with the ACC? Wouldn't winning the ACC in a few years be like winning the world's tallest dwarfism award? I found out recently that M word is a bad word. So anywho, I just don't see why Miami would want that, right? Financially, they could afford whatever the cost may be to get out of the ACC and to get in a new conference. But could they afford to do that if it were the Big 10 or the SEC? On top of that, would they be willing to pay whatever that fee might be if the Big 10 and the SEC have already voiced some discretion not being had about whether they're going to be viable to fit in the conference or not. I think this is an opportunity for Brett Yormark in the Big 12. We need to step up. We need to make a presentation to Miami. I think they would be great for the Big 12. We just talked about the flag bearers and the blue blood conversations. We don't have that with OU and Texas being gone. I think that the parity of the conference is what's driving the marketability needle at the moment. But if the ACC is going to continuously have Miami looked over, I think this is a perfect time to make a huge sales pitch to Miami. Not only does it help geographically, I think we've always been needing a new partner for West Virginia. And yes, West Virginia has been kind of thrown into this potentially leaving the Big 12 mix. And maybe there's some viability to West Virginia leaving the conference. I doubt it, especially if you have the ability to aggressively go grab them another travel partner. And that's the biggest difficulty for West Virginia, and even some degree UCF and Cincinnati, is geographically how much they have to travel and what they have to spend on travel to hit all of the Big 12 destinations. So if you were to grab Miami, or even to some degree, like let's grab Miami and Virginia Tech and even a Pitt or maybe even a Georgia Tech, I do think that there's a good situation to be had for the Big 12 here, right? The Big 10 and the SEC, they've talked about getting to 20 schools. Maybe we should do that. Brett Yormark talked about doing the third-party, proprietary sponsorship, essentially, where they give away percentage of the conference. Yet other conferences kind of taken what Brett Yormark started, and now they're running with it. The naming, the branding rights to be the Dr. Pepper All-State Big 12. Now other conferences are talking about. So Brett Yormark continuously has these brilliant ideas, and then he allows other conferences to kind of jump in and steal that. This is his opportunity, I think, to prove a point here. While the Miami is going to continuously getting looked over by all these other conversational pieces for other conferences, this is where we should strike. I still think that Miami financially has enough capabilities to instantaneously be the highest NIL spending team in the conference. Is that the end-all, be-all to success? No, it is not. But you have to be competitive in NIL. And I think geographically, if you have another partner, maybe UCF wouldn't exactly be thrilled about Miami being in the conference, but I think at the end of the day, it does add another geographical partner, which they would understand. It would add to the viability and the future of the Big 12, which I also think they would understand. And of course, this is going to be somewhat of a package deal, right? The Louisvilles, the NC States even are going to be potential options, but I think Miami should be the number one target. Because Florida State, again, they seem to be very reminiscent of what Texas did to the Big 12, just causing a lot of problems and demanding more money and asking for more favoritism. And unfortunately, we had Big 12 commissioners that kept giving it to them. So their inferiority complex would never go away. Matter of fact, we heard about how Texas was back every single year, even though they got beat like a redheaded stepchild and drugged behind a woodshed for, 15 years playing Oklahoma State. This conference is looking for more opportunities. And I think that some of the things that Brett Yormark has been very visionary about, he's allowed to kind of slip by the wayside. This is a time for Brett Yormark to kind of grab the bull by the horns once again, make a statement, and make something big happen. I don't buy that Miami would want to stay in the ACC. Yes, they would be the best in the ACC, and they would essentially get the quote-unquote lion's share of the finances in the ACC, but how long does it last? And is it going to be viable in the future? It seems ridiculous to even insinuate that Miami would not make this kind of move. So this is the opportunity for Brett Yormark to jump while the iron is hot. They're getting disrespected. They're getting overlooked. And I'm sure they don't like it. And I'm sure that they're not going to want to stay in a conference that isn't going to hold the prestige. I mean, it's just like the Pac-12. They're adding some pretty cool teams to kind of keep their head above water, but it's likely never going to put them in contention to be one of the heavy hitters again. Not to mention the fact that if they do change the CFP stuff, whether it be the 4-2-2 or the 5-11 model, you do want to put yourself in a position to be at the forefront of that. The Big 12 is going to be in a position probably more so than the ACC. The best team in the ACC last year was SMU in their first year. I don't know necessarily that's a good thing for the conference. Just like I don't think it's a good thing for Miami to even entertain staying in the Dine Conference when the Big 12 is clearly on the rise and the SEC is kind of taking a little bit of a backseat, at least to the Big 10 recently. I see the comments starting to roll in, so here in a little bit we're going to start flashing them, but we're going to finish this as a regular episode for all of the podcasts and people out there before we start the engagement aspect. All right, lastly, we have to talk about Mike Gundy. What is safe for him entering the season? I think that, his prestige, the guy who deserves a statue for sure. I think no matter what happens this season, he bought himself another year at least because of him firing everybody. And you all know I have not always been the biggest Mike Gundy proponent. I think that there's been times that he should have been checked, but I think this previous season was that. But I also think the Board of Regents went too far. I think the Board of Regents is proven to be, I don't want to slip up and say the wrong word. They're petty, right? That's what it is. They didn't like what it looked like to have Casey Strom and Chad Weiberg go over their heads and orchestrate the new Mike Gundy deal. He was able to shave off $15 million of his buyout. He was able to take a $1.25 million haircut from his paycheck. So Mike Gundy did participate, whether it was with Strom, Weiberg, Board of Regents. To me, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because it did happen. But it doesn't mean that there's not a target. There's clearly some bad blood between the Board of Regents and everybody that prevented them from doing what they wanted to do. And according to them, their deadline was 5 p.m. If Mike Gundy has not signed the new deal by 5 p.m., then Oklahoma State was out of a football coach. Well, he didn't take that deal. So after 5 p.m., the Board of Regents was bumping around, acting like we're already talking to new coaches. Come to find out, the former president that got let go and Chad Weiberg, who's the athletic director, who has not been given a new contract, they worked around the Board of Regents to do what was right by Oklahoma State. And he had to make some concessions, Mike Gundy, other than just the overall shaving of the contract and the buyout. He also fired everybody. I think a lot of us assumed that he would keep a couple people, right? John Wozniak, from historical name alone, probably could have been one of the coaches that stayed, but he answered the bell. He got rid of everybody. He rebuilt everything. He invested in NIL to an unprecedented level. We're recruiting dudes that we've never recruited before. We're recruiting more aggressively than we've ever recruited before. We're doing more things that a lot of us didn't think was going to happen under Mike Gundy. But Mike Gundy is the one that has allowed all of this to kind of take place. It doesn't matter if it was a little bit forced or not. The fact of the matter is he could have stuck to his guns. He could have stayed stubborn and told Strom and Weiberg, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not taking a $15 million buyout cut. I'm not taking a $1.25 million a year million pay cut. I'm not doing that. And then we have a completely different conversation. But he did all that. However, it is pretty evident that the Board of Regents is not done. They are not done with the way they felt slighted. So with that being the case, or seemingly very visibly the case, are they not just waiting on the next shoe to drop? Are they not waiting on another 3 or 4 win season? If that happens, to me, they've already given themselves all of the reasoning they need to get rid of Mike Gundy if we slide backwards or have a comparable season. Thankfully, I don't think that's going to happen. 7 home games alone are very beneficial. You don't play Arizona State. You don't play BYU. You don't play TCU. You don't play WV. You have the 7 home games. You get to play Baylor at home. You get to play Kansas State at home, Iowa State at home. Realistically, the 2 most difficult road games are going to be at Oregon and at Texas Tech. And at Texas Tech, it depends on what they look like. Are they a 500 ball club and we're playing at 11? Then that would probably favor Oklahoma State. Are they an 8-win ball club or 7-win ball club that's top 10 in the country and it's a night game? Then that would obviously probably favor Texas Tech. So there's a lot of things that go into this that I think no matter what, Mike Gundy needs to have a bounce back season. For the Board of Regents to not want to look for a reason to run him out of Dodge. 7 wins seems to be the accepted basement level for Oklahoma State football, at least traditionally speaking, under Mike Gundy. I feel like that's feasible. After a 3-win season, getting back to 7 wins, is it ideal? No. But I think that's more than enough for Mike Gundy to at least get another year. That revolving 5-year contract for a lifetime, probably, it's never going to happen again. But I don't want to see Mike Gundy go out with a 3-win season, so I'm glad that he's back. I'm glad that he brought in Grantham and Meacham and all of the assistant coaches and all of the recruiting acumen that these coaches brought to the plan here. But at the end of the day, the Board of Regents is probably not going to sit idly by. So let me know down in the comments section or for the live comments that we're about to get to, what do you guys think the barometer is for Mike Gundy to get more time from the Board of Regents after they kind of felt some type of way over his negotiation this last go-around. If he wins 3 games again, unfortunately, that probably gives them all of the ammunition they need. If he wins 5 games, is that enough of an improvement for them to give him another year or two? Probably not. It almost feels like Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State need to get back to that 7-8 win window for the Board of Regents to not continue to peddily go after people. Because if Chad Weiberg doesn't get a new contract, Mike Gundy might be the next on the chopping block. I don't agree with it. I think he bought himself another season, even if we win 3 games this year, because of his understanding of the landscape and the changing of the NIL and the payments and the coaches, the staff, the recruiting. He changed everything. He took what he's been doing for 19 years and he threw it all in the trash. That deserves something, but it might not in the Board of Regents' eyes. All right, so we're about to get to the live comment section here. For all you fine folks out here on the podcasting platform, I appreciate what you do, so do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave the reviews. Later to you, taters. All right. You live kids in here, we're going to get to this fun stuff in the conversation. But again, let me know, what do you think the barometer is for Mike Gundy to be able to get more time at Oklahoma State? Is 3 wins, is that a death sentence? Is 5 wins okay? Is 7 wins the basement for what they would deem to be acceptable? I don't know. But it doesn't look good. It definitely doesn't look good. All right, live comment section. Here we go. It's been a while. Why do we have 3 players listed at number 2 on the roster? I don't know. I really do not know. Likely because, and this is a stab in the dark, probably because Talon's not going to play this year, like at all. There's no chance, especially if we're already divvying up number 2s to 2 different individuals. Naturally, Jalen Davies, the UCLA cornerback, is going to rock number 2, but who's going to rock the offensive number 2 if Talon Shetron's not going to do it? That is pretty interesting because somebody mentioned that the other day, that there was a couple different number 2s, and I didn't know that originally. We're going to get fired. Yeah, okay. See, here you go. Miko was a little early to the party here, but yeah, I feel like the Board of Regents definitely has an axe to grind, and they're looking for a reason. They're looking for a reason. And I hope Mike Gundy doesn't give it to him, but I'm concerned about what that line may be. Wet blanket, fall camp, and we talk. Yeah, of course we're talking about realignment. This was just to relaunch the live stuff. This wasn't a big meat and taters episode. But yeah, I mean, Florida State is already making some things known. Therefore, the ACC is on borrowed time. And instead of waiting until that window is up, I think this is prime for Brett Yormark to make a big move. Bringing in Miami or even Virginia Tech, right? Georgia Tech, Louisville. Those would be splash hires, splash deals. That would make the Big 12 much more conversational. That Miko, 8 wins a minimum to get Gundy back. See, I think 7 wins probably does the job. And I feel like 7 wins is realistically where the basement should be. Again, from a scheduling perspective, this is the good one. This is the same reason why I projected Oklahoma State to win 10 games 2 years ago. Not necessarily because I thought we were going to be world beaters, but the schedule, I think, set us up very, very well for that. And naturally, we did win 10 games. We played Texas in the Big 12 championship game. And, that gave us a peek behind the curtain of what Texas was going to look like in the Big 12. So, or the SEC. So I'm somewhat okay with it, right? And at the end of the day, I was at that game, and it was pretty obvious, unfortunately, pretty quickly, that they're just way, way better than we were, right? So I got to tool around and drink some beers and have some fun and enjoy Jerry World, which was exciting. But the game in and of itself, unfortunately, was over very, very early on. Like, just the kickoff, they were significantly bigger and faster than we were, right? And Ollie Gordon being banged up didn't exactly help either. Having a 70% Ollie Gordon with 3 pounds of tape on his ankle coming into that game wasn't very beneficial. And then he got hurt, his 6th or 7th carry of the game. Wet blanket. So everyone wins money on the over. I hope not. I hope not. Wet. And like I said, I've after 2022, I thought Gundy should have been put on a 1-year deal. But part of that was just not acknowledging the deficiencies that Casey Dunn had and the issues that Charlie Dickey had and that Jason McIndoe wasn't getting anything out of anybody. That was my frustration. And, of course, the Spencer Sanders saga. There was a lot of things factoring into that, right? Not always being at practices, X, Y, and Z. There was a multitude of things that I thought maybe could have caused Mike Gundy to be put on a 1-year deal. But I don't like the way the Board of Regents went about this. I don't like the way it went down. I don't think that they should be acting this way to Mike Gundy because he did everything that acknowledges the issues. He fired the coaches that were the problem. He changed recruiting. He changed how aggressive we are in recruiting. He changed the parameters on who's okay to recruit and who's not. He went out and hired a head coach of the defense, Todd Grantham, and he's paying him $1.3 million, which is head coaching money at a lot of institutions. So I do feel like that Oklahoma State has put themselves in a position to be successful this upcoming season because of some of the things that Mike Gundy's agreed to do, some of those concessions that he made. I don't think it should matter realistically at the end of the day if he made the concessions with Weiberg and Schrum or, he went with the Board of Regents stuff. But, dude, like it's very evident. Like they did not want Schrum in the mix. So they got rid of her as soon as physically possible. They got rid of Chris Young because Casey Schrum was backing Schrum. And then Weiberg should be getting a new contract, but he's not getting one. To me, that indicates that they already have somebody in mind to replace Chad Weiberg, just like they already had Jim Hess in mind to replace Dr. Casey Schrum. There's been stuff floated around that some of the powers that be wanted Jim Hess to be the president before Dr. Casey Schrum. So some of those same individuals that are obviously operating off of some animosity and some butthurt, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. So when you have the power brokers that are pulling the strings and they've got buddies in the Board of Regents and they've got potentially family in the Board of Regents, I don't think that's good. I don't think that's good for Oklahoma State. And I think the firing of Chris Young proves that. Does anybody really believe that the tennis coach that just won an indoor national championship a year and a half ago, has one of the best recruiting classes in the country and one of the best portal classes in the country? I'm not a tennis guy, but, I got into it a year and a half, 2 years ago. Whenever we were making that run, I even watched the indoor national title. But does anybody really believe that Chris Young got fired because he contacted recruits a week too early? Get the flip out of here. That's not it. There's clearly something deeper here. And unfortunately, Mike Gundy doesn't factor into the bright side of the animosity that seems to be happening behind closed doors. It's hard to predict more than 3 wins last year, but wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it would take Zane Flores and Haas Haney breaking their legs or arms for us to win 3 games again. I know, I believe you were one of the people that, believed in Bowman. I made my opinions felt very early about Alan Bowman. I thought he was a good backup quarterback. Right. But I never thought he was going to be a full-time starter. And he clearly didn't look like the best quarterback on the team this previous season either. So whatever was happening, right, I do know that defensively there was some dudes getting playing time because of favoritism and because of NIL money. Can I say that about Alan Bowman? No, I can't. I don't know. But there's a reason Alan Bowman was playing. And nobody can explain still yet as to why that reason was. I mean, it didn't take a rocket scientist to see that dude just was not very good last year, especially with the offensive line problems. From a PFF grading standpoint, our O-line wasn't drastically better in 2023, but they were better. This last year, Alan Bowman was running for his life, and poor Crawdad couldn't backpedal fast enough to get out of the trouble and still complete a pass. So why he was out there, I don't know. I mean, I think even if you overlook Garrett Rangel, or if you want to overlook Montelwake Smith, there was instances last season where Zane Flores was healthy. Why? I mean, see, that's some of the stuff. At the end of the day, it is on Mike Gundy. Mike Gundy should have gone to somebody and said, this is not going to work. But maybe that's the thing. Maybe Mike Gundy was the one saying, Alan Bowman's the dude. We're going to ride this crawdad machine until the wheels fall off, and then the wheels fell off. But, yeah, I don't think we're going to have that situation this year. I just think that the talent pool is too good. The coaching staff is why I'm so excited. The complacency, the laziness, the favoritism, that's all gone. This coaching staff literally does not care where you came from, what you did previously. They know that they're on a mission. Some of these dudes probably want to get, head coaching jobs. Most of this defensive staff, like 80% of this defensive staff, came from the SEC. Perhaps they're going to want opportunity at some point in time to get a lower level SEC head coaching job. So if they can have a Jim Knowles style of successful couple seasons in Stillwater, then they're going to be able to do that. So I'm excited about the season because of that. We weren't getting the individual technical training. I guess he's gone now, so I can talk about it. Justin Kirkland was telling me that they learned more, which is the biggest reason he wanted to stay in Stillwater. They learned more technically in Todd Grantham's first 2.5 weeks than they did all year the previous year. And this is after we brought in Paul Randolph. So I thought Paul Randolph, with his 25 years of experience bouncing between different leagues, I thought he was going to be huge for the development of that defensive line, but they've regressed. They got worse than they did after Greg Richmond left. And Greg Richmond left because he didn't agree with the 3-3-5. And, maybe Greg Richmond ended up being right at the end of the day. I love Nardo. He's my dude, right? But, there's a lot of things that weren't necessarily working. But I do know some of it was personnel. And I do know that Brian Nardo did not fully agree with some of the personnel that was starting, but he felt like his hands were tied because his hands were tied at certain points in the season. That's the thing. There was a lot of external factors that took people outside of their comfort zone, and there was people making decisions that really shouldn't have been, right? At the end of the day, it does come down to Mike Gundy, though, and he did make the decision to get rid of all of that crap, which is why I wholeheartedly believe that there's no way we go back to 3 wins. I supported our QB that beat OU and won 10 games, made the CCG. Yeah, I get it. I get it. But again, it was very evident after like week 4 that it wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to work. And yes, our offensive playbook being 44 plays, that doesn't help either. But again, we didn't address the issues last year. And whether it was a Mike Gundy issue or a Casey Dunn or a Brian Nardo or a Joe Bob Clements or whatever the case is, it wasn't working. And instead of doing things to fix it, we just let it ride, right? Instead of implementing different quarterbacks to see what it would look like without Alan Bowman, we just let it ride for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks with Alan Bowman. Instead of mixing up the offensive line, Jason Queso-Brooks and Noah McKinney had better PFF grades in the games that they played than the starters did, yet we just kept rolling the starters out there. I know we had an offensive lineman last year that was a 6th-year senior that was late to like 11 meetings. Did he get punished? No, they kept letting the dude start, and it looked very visible on the field that some of these dudes are checked out. Some of these dudes are not bought in. So why are they starting? Why are they playing? But all of those coaches that were making those decisions are gone. So at the end of the day, that's what has me most pumped about this upcoming season. Hopefully our defense looks more like Trump's wall instead of Biden's wall. Todd Grantham's, am I frozen? Am I frozen to y'all? Oh, there we go. Todd Grantham is a bad dude. He is a bad dude. I will say the vulgarity has kicked up a notch or 17 this season. Now, do I think that should be a barometer for how good a coach is? No, not necessarily. I don't think you need an overabundance of F-bombs to accentuate a point, but that's how NFL operations are. Unfortunately, that's how the SEC operations typically are. Even OU, I mean, not OU, but Clemson, right? Venables is a very straight-laced, very Christian-oriented individual. Yet he has guys on his sidelines, including BV, Brett Venables, that were cussing up storms left and right, 24/7, all day, every day. Is it that bad on OSU sidelines now? Not necessarily, but they are more aggressive, and they're getting into these dudes, you know what? they're holding them more accountable. They're riding them harder than previously. And that has me very, very excited. Aggressiveness was never an issue. Todd Grantham at Florida, right? We've discussed this. The third down and Grantham thing was what Florida fans kind of ran him out of Dodge for. But if you even go back and look at some of those third down difficulties, they were like top 3 in the SEC like 2 years in a row in sacks and tackles for loss. So, yes, they did give up chunk plays on third down, which was the Achilles heel of Todd Grantham at Florida. But outside of that, he was pretty dominant. So I think if he can kind of resolve some of those issues with third downs, then I think we're going to get the Florida version of Todd Grantham without those obstacles. I mean, if you talk to Mississippi State fans, they swear by Todd Grantham. There's Mississippi State fans that have been hooting and hollering and begging for Todd Grantham to be their head coach for a few different years now. So Mississippi State loves him, right? They think he's the best thing since sliced bread. But Florida fans bring up that third down situation. I think it's going to be surprising. Hopefully, we're at least coaching. Basic fundamentals like tackling. Again, this defensive staff, like Todd Grantham, spent 11 years in the NFL, almost the same exact amount of time in the SEC, multiple stops. Mississippi State, Florida, Alabama, being the defensive coordinator for Nick Saban surely taught him a lot. And then we just recently grabbed him from the New Orleans Saints. I don't think we're going to be as, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe soft. Yeah, maybe that is the word. We didn't look like a team that liked tackling much last year, so I guess you could throw soft into this mix. But I do think that the contact, the aggressiveness, the intensity is going to be significantly different this season. And it's because of this coaching staff. So with that, I think it naturally would lend itself to us being better at tackling because the pursuit angles is important. You know, the understanding of what is happening, it's important. But being able to wrap up and tackle is also important. I think that these new age athletes, they're losing something and not having 2 days. I was just talking about this with my son recently. I love 2 days. I did. I absolutely loved it. And I'm thankful enough that I can say that when I played my college football days, it was still at the time of 2 days. It was still at the time where you could throw up all day and just continue to be about your business. I think that that did make us more resilient, not only in football, but just in life in general. So I think we need this intensity. I mean, they're already playing with so much advanced metrics on concussion protocols and injury protocols and diagnosis. I mean, heck, back in the day, if you had an ACL, like my cousin tore his ACL, he was done. He tore his ACL like 11th grade, never picked up a football again, essentially. Because back in the day, like if you had an ACL, that was it. Your career was over. It's completely different these days. But I think part of that could be masked a little bit more if we ramped up the intensity level. It's still football. This isn't dance, right? We're not in tutus. They're still in football pads. They still need to let dudes go out and be dudes and bang heads. So, yes, practices need to be more intense. The downside of that is you're going to have injuries in practice, but you're going to have injuries no matter what. And I think from a conditioning standpoint or conditioning on hitting standpoint, if you're going to lose dudes, you'd rather lose them early, right? If you're going to have somebody have an injury, it's better for it to happen in fall camp or week 1 than week 10 or week 12 whenever you're trying to make a run at a Big 12 championship game. I don't know. All right, we got any more comments to be fired in here? I like the live stuff. There's a lot of reasons why it's difficult to go live. Like Locked On's changed some things and they've upgraded some things and they've done some things a little bit differently, which is making it a little bit more advantageous to do this kind of stuff. And throughout the course of the season, I think it's a good way to interact. I also, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this little test run today, I keep seeing, I'm not very technologically advanced, but I keep seeing people like do their live stuff on Twitter. And when I joined some other shows, like when I was on Mark Rogers' college football show, it gave me the option to put the live show on Twitter, but I can't do the regular recorded shows on Twitter. So I thought maybe I'm just not seeing it. I thought by doing this, I could hit that button where it's like live on Twitter as well. Maybe I'm missing something. I don't know. Anywho, if that's all y'all got, I reckon that this was a good little kickoff to the live season. The objective will be to, do a live a week. Sometimes it'll be 2. But now that they've changed some of the things behind the scenes at Locked On, it does make it easier. It makes it more financially viable. So I'm excited. I've always loved live stuff. I think in the beginning, I thought that's what all of this was. But, I'm only a couple of years into this deal, so I'm learning as I go. And I still am not done learning because I don't see that share with Twitter button. Anyways, I'll have to find it because that was one of the things I was excited about. Because I used to do Twitter Spaces when I was first getting into all this, and I don't do it as much anymore. Actually, I don't do Twitter Spaces at all anymore. But that's because I thought it was going to be easy to pop these up on Twitter Live. Maybe I'm missing it. I'll have to do some more digging, but that's something I will work on because I do see the audiences from Twitter to YouTube and the podcasting world. Sometimes it's completely different, right? Sometimes people get better numbers on Twitter than YouTube and podcast. This is a podcasting company. Originally, when I first started a couple of years ago, YouTube was kind of new, right? Not every host was doing YouTube stuff. So this is more designed for the podcast audio listener was how this whole thing was designed. So they're trying to find new ways. Like there's a Patreon type stuff. They've discussed having something comparable. I think that's something that is still in the works. I don't know, but algorithmically, I was hoping to find a way to put this stuff on Twitter as well. So I'll keep fishing and I'll find out how to do it. Because I know you can do it. I see people do it all the time. I've done it. Like the last time I was on Mark Rogers' Voice of College Football show, it up in the right-hand corner, it said, would you like to stream? And you clicked on it, and it gave Twitter as one of the options. But it's not doing that for me here. I see 6 wins, bowl appearance. However, no one can see if Gundy has built something great. I'm excited. I think he's embraced some things more so than ever. And that was my biggest frustration with Gundy since 2022 is like, stop pretending that Casey Dunn's not the problem. Stop pretending that Casey Dunn is not the issue with the quarterbacks and the wide receivers and there being a split in the locker room and there being a division and people wanting to basically transfer during the season. And it wasn't just because of Spencer Sanders. A large portion of it was because of Casey Dunn, but Mike Gundy ignored it. Right? The offensive innovation when South Alabama was making fun of our playbook, saying that they knew exactly what we were going to run in the fourth quarter because they practiced it. And sure enough, that's what we rolled out in the fourth quarter, the stuff that South Alabama practiced. They practiced our entire playbook. And then South Dakota State, they said something comparable. They weren't throwing as much shade as South Alabama was, but South Dakota State said the same thing. They knew what we were going to do, so they were defensively set up for it. The defenses this year, they knew it was going to happen. My issue with Mike Gundy was that this has been happening. This wasn't a new thing for Casey Dunn to be bad as an offensive coordinator, but because they were friends, because he likes the cohesiveness of having people on staff for 15 years, he just kept letting it happen. And that was my biggest annoyance, was Mike Gundy was just burying his head in the sand and refusing to acknowledge that Mike Gundy and Charlie Dickey and Jason McAdoo, these dudes were the problem. There were some coaches on the defensive staff that were part of the problem. And instead of acknowledging it, he just kept hiring them over and over and over. He did away with all that. To me, this is why he should be viewed a little bit differently in this upcoming season. I think he should be given a little bit more grace because of all that in this upcoming season. I don't know if it's going to happen, though. I don't know if the Board of Regents is going to give him that grace period. I honestly believe, and I hope I'm wrong, I believe that the Board of Regents is yearning for a reason to get rid of Mike Gundy. Because they made him look bad. He made them look bad. He made them look weak and feckless and spineless. And it was a bad look. Call a spade a spade. I didn't know that your head coach could just tell the Board of Regents, "Now I'm not going to listen to you." I didn't know you could do that. And of course, the Board of Regents, they don't want that being something that's visibly acceptable. They don't want anybody else to ever think that I'll just do what Mike Gundy did. I'll just ignore them. I'll bypass their deadline and I'll go straight to the AD and the president. Because what that did was put a target on the AD and the president. And I don't think Mike Gundy thought that at the time. I don't think Mike Gundy would have, pushed the envelope quite to the degree that he did if he would have known that this is going to make them go after Strom and Weiberg. I don't think Gundy would have done it that way. But regardless, he also didn't feel like he should be put in that position to be given a 5 p.m. deadline. But if that didn't happen, is Casey Dunn, Charlie Dickey, Jason McAdoo, are they all still here? Like, that's the only bright side to what did happen, was the Board of Regents did put him in a position where Strom and Weiberg both said, "Hey, man, listen, we're going to help you here, but you got to work with us. You got to do some major things." And obviously he was willing to do that, and he did that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if 6 wins is good enough for the Board of Regents. I don't. Again, I firmly hope that I'm wrong, but it seems pretty obvious, like blatantly obvious, that the Board of Regents has an axe to grind. That's why they've been making the moves they've been making. They've been getting rid of the people that have given them problems, and they're bringing in the people that they know will go along with what they want done. So, anywho, all right, y'all. This is obviously I still have some kinks to work out in the live stuff, but we got football season right around the corner. We're going to start doing these a lot more regularly. So I wanted to tinker with it a little bit here, and I'll keep tinkering until I get it smooth sailing. All righty, y'all. Until the next one or the next episode, I appreciate you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate what you do. I don't have to say, hit the stars and leave the reviews for the podcast people, because this is just the live YouTube community left. But hit the like, subscribe, and have fun in the comments section. And let me know what ACC schools you think should join the fold. Should we go hardcore in on Miami, or should we wait until a little bit later? Maybe Wet Blanket wants us to wait. I don't think we should wait. Strike now. Florida State, North Carolina, Clemson, they want out. They're getting out. Whatever the case is, it's okay. Go do it. Brett Yomar, go make it happen, Captain. All right, y'all. Later, taters.